Hello and welcome back to the Puncher's Chance podcast, and welcome to the review show where we look back at all the fights, everything that happened over the weekend. This week, that is Joe Joyce versus Filip Hrgovic and the rest of that boxing card, as well as Richard Torrez Jr. versus Guido Vianello over in the States. And we're going to kick it straight off with Joe Joyce versus Filip Hrgovic. Obviously, as you can tell if you're watching the video version, we are online, so we'll be hopefully back in the studio next week, but online this week for this. What do we make of Joe Joyce's performance? It was a weird one. For a while, I thought maybe it was going to be something a little bit better than we'd seen previously, but ultimately, he still lost, didn't he?
Yeah, I was surprised they went the full distance. I thought one of them were getting stopped somewhere. That's what I had called. But yeah, it showed that Joyce has still got something in the tank, but I don't think that's the worry with people. I think it's more the fact that he takes so many heavy shots. That's the issue that people have. And he was talking about he's still happy to continue because he's still earning money. But it's all well and good making that money. But if you're not going to be in a healthy state to enjoy the benefits of that, then what's the point of doing it? And I think that's just the only issue that people are having.
Well, I thought, like we all said, I honestly thought it was going to be stopped. I thought this had a stoppage written all over it. But what we've learned from Joe Joyce and what you said in the group chat on Saturday night, Sam, he's got one of the best chins in boxing. How the hell he didn't go down throughout that 10-round fight was unbelievable. But yeah, for me now, it's time to hang up his gloves. He's had a great career. You know, but a lot of people forget that he's beaten both Joseph Parker and Daniel Dubois. Daniel Dubois is fighting for an undisputed title in his next fight, and Joseph Parker is going to probably be pushing on fighting the winner of that fight. So he's had a great career, so I wouldn't be disappointed if he left. But who am I to say that he should retire? You know, I'm just a boxing fan. He can do whatever he wants. But from the outside looking in, I think, yeah, it's definitely time for him to go.
Yeah, I don't think it's disrespectful either to tell him, or not to tell him, but to say, I think maybe it's time to hang up the gloves. I think people say that from a point of caring to many degrees. You know, like you say, his first line of defense is his chin, and it's mighty impressive, but it doesn't show longevity. And to take the shots that Filip Hrgovic was delivering time after time, that right hand, and just kind of walk through it like it wasn't even, you know, a little flick jab. He was just kind of walking through it, going, yeah. And he did some good work, some better work than I think we've seen of him previously in his last sort of 3-4 performances. But he's not the Joe Joyce of old, is he? He really isn't still.
No, and the crazy thing about it is, I think if it went an extra 2 rounds, I think he might have been in with a case of nicking it. Because somehow he just kept walking through those shots, and I felt like Hrgovic was slowing down the more the rounds went, as he normally does. Even though he won, I don't think he looked very impressive, and I can't see him causing many issues to anyone inside that top 10 now. But I think Hrgovic makes a good gatekeeper for someone trying to break through, and in terms of a next opponent, I'd look at Richard Torrez Jr., who we'll obviously speak about later on, who looked quite good over the weekend. But someone like that who's sort of looking to get a good name on their resume as they're building up, I think is as sad as it is to say. And I don't want to be disrespectful to Hrgovic, but I think that's where he stands now in the heavyweight division.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, Richard Torrez Jr., he's got Moses Ataima as well. He's probably stuck with Kubrat Pulev. But yeah, I would not be against Filip Hrgovic being the gatekeeper, but what a name to have on the cards of a record for a fighter coming through mine. You know, let's not forget Filip Hrgovic beat Zhilei Zhang. Obviously beat in bunny years because I don't think he beat him that night. But no, it was a decent performance. But like you said, as the fight went on, Joe Joyce grew in confidence, I thought, and he was like, I can take these shots all night long. So let's just keep on coming forward and let's have a swinging battle with him. And it reminded me a little bit of the Derek Chisora fight. Obviously, in round 9, he got hit quite badly in both in the Chisora fight. And I thought we were going to have the same repeat in this fight. But yeah, listen, for even Joe Joyce as well now, he can be a gatekeeper. You know, if people can forget that, oh, right, he's lost all these fights. But for a fighter coming through that's at English level, fighting Joe Joyce can get a big name on your record, could be something good for yourself.
It is crazy to think, like you said earlier, though, that he was once the man, Olympic silver medalist, beat Daniel Dubois and beat Joseph Parker. Based off that resume alone, you'd argue he's probably the second best boxer in the world right now, but he's not, obviously, because of the other fighters he's lost to. And like you say, I wouldn't mind it as a gatekeeper. I mean, someone like Moses Atoma versus Joe Joyce. If you're wanting to test Moses Atoma beyond the big shots he can land, then that's the kind of fight, because if anyone can take him, it's Joe Joyce. I don't think Joe Joyce would be able to take him for 10 rounds. I think that would be perhaps a step too far and not a fight I necessarily have an interest in seeing. But like you say, there is a place for him if he wants it. But I do think someone needs to maybe step in and say, look, Joe, you're on a one-way train to some possible problems down the line if you just keep on fighting. Whereas maybe you could, cool it off now. You've had a great career and people have enjoyed it, and you can still enjoy your retirement with all your wits about you, hopefully.
Yeah, that's the difficult thing. It is genuinely, it's not for the want of wanting to see it, nor wanting to see him fight. And he clearly is still very interested in doing it. It's the concern, I think, with fans, because he's such a likable guy as well. And like, everyone does really like him. It's the worry of what comes down the line when the type of fighter he is, who just stands there and walks through shots. Like, if he keeps taking them for the next 5 or whatever years it is, that long-term damage is what's worrying.
Yeah. Oh, so we're all saying then that Joe Joyce should really retire then? We all
if you're wanting the
I think
the soundbite, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But it's I think, yeah, it has to be. He's like you said, he's entertaining for the crowd. That's one good thing. He's always in good fights, Joe Joyce. But down the line, like we said, it can affect his life after boxing, and that's where he should be enjoying life. And that could, we don't want him to leave the boxing ring. He's 40 in September. Let's not forget that. Joe Joyce is 39 at the moment. So, he's not in his late 20s, early 30s. He's at the twilight of his career. So, if he fights again, I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here, but if he fights again, I'm going to watch it because he's a very entertaining fighter to watch. But I'm probably going to be watching it with my hands over my eyes, because I don't want him to be, getting hurt, because boxing's a cruel sport. And like we said, when he's in retirement, it could affect him badly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we could go on about this probably all day, but we shan't, because there are plenty of other quality fights to talk about. The card was named Heavy Impact. We thought it would be because there was going to be a load of heavyweights on the bill. That didn't happen, but it did still, I think, be fitting. Heavy Impact in terms of what the referees had on the the end results of the fights. David Adeleye versus Jeamie TKV as a first one. There was obviously one earlier in the night as well, which we'll get onto, but it's a difficult one to take because I really like David Adeleye, and it is a bit of a questionable one, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But I felt like they were both at it slightly, to be honest with you. Like, TKV landed a couple as well that were questionable. I think he just got caught with the worst one, because his hand was literally taken away, so he didn't have any defence. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they sort of go with that, whether they're going to rule it a no contest. I don't think they will, because I think the old saying of sort of protect yourself at all times is going to be the key message after that. But more than anything, I thought it was just a bit of a drab fight after the build-up towards it. I didn't think it was massively as interesting as the build-up was. And I feel like the both of them are probably they were fighting for a British title, and I think that's their level. I don't think they'd trouble anyone beyond that. Whether you'd get a rematch after this, I don't know whether they'd be interested, but yeah, I don't think it was particularly a great watch.
No, I completely agree. Like you said, not the best of watches, but when a referee slaps a fighter's arm down, calls break twice, that's saying to protect yourself at all times. Technically, the referee's protecting you there because he's told you to break, stop fighting. And then all of a sudden, David Adeleye hits him with that hook, and he's like, oh, hang on a minute, you're on the floor now. All right, we'll start counting. 1, 2, 3. That, for me, it should be overturned, because I think in a way TKV can feel like he's been cheated out of it in a way of the referee called break and he put his guard down and probably took a step back to have a breathe and then obviously got caught. And it's nothing against David Adeleye. What people need to realise, it's not David Adelaye's fault. It's the referee's fault, and obviously the British Boxing Board of Control for putting in a referee like they put in on Saturday night, because he looked out of his depth. And and this week now he should be going to the board and telling them what he did, why he did it, explain it, and in a way should be suspended, and that's the only outcome that should come from it for both the referees from Saturday night. You can't be slapping a boxer's hand down, calling break, and then still allowing the boxer then to hit him and then start counting. That shouldn't be allowed. But yeah, like Ben said, it was not the best of watches, that fight. I honestly thought from the build-up we had, I thought, yeah, we're in for a classic here. British title fights, everyone gets up for a British title fight. Their styles didn't match. And in a way, I was quite happy that Adeleye got the stoppage, because it meant that we didn't have to watch any more of it. But I think TKV can count himself unlucky. And the best thing to do now, apart from it was a boring fight, run it back. There's still unfinished business there, and there's still a narrative that they can go down that TKV didn't lose that fight because of Adeleye. He lost that fight because of the referee.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this. I don't say this too often. I wholeheartedly agree with Harry Tovey. I think I think he's right. I think it was. I do get the idea, the sentiment, protect yourself at all times, and that is correct. And they do say that. But when a referee is quite literally pulled your glove down for you to break, there is a split second where you shouldn't throw a shot. That's how that works. But he threw it anyway, and it was a hell of a shot, and he made it count when he did. So fair play to Adeleye for that, and he got the finish when he had to. But yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if this gets given as a no contest, because when you watch the video back, like you say, he says break very clearly twice, and they don't break. And so when he physically breaks them apart, that's a point where you can't throw a shot when the ref has intervened. But also, I think the fact that he just kind of pulled TKV's glove down was just separate the fighters and go again. Like you said, it just did seem like he was a bit out of his depth in a way, or just wasn't suited to that fight. And the stars didn't match up. So like, I wouldn't be mad if I didn't see it again, but I do hope, maybe for Jeamie TKV's sake, that he gets another fight, because to lose on that, to me, seems like harsh, and it takes away from what should have been, a great performance from him. Otherwise, he was doing pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, to stick up for the referee a bit though, I don't think I'd be too keen to jump in the middle of them two, because they're some big boys. But
good point.
Do you think, in terms of, obviously it made a massive impact on the end result, but it looked like Jeamie TKV was sorting to edge his way into the fight and probably take control of it the further it was going. So do you think he could have gone on to win it? And do you think that gives more of a case for getting a rematch in the future between the two of them?
Completely agree. He was building into that fight. He was, he's a slow starter, I think, TKV, from what I've seen of him in the past. And, that was evident on Saturday night. But yeah, they have to run it back, surely. And he's been robbed. And you can understand the frustration of Ben Shalom. Sometimes I don't agree with what Ben Shalom says a lot of the time, but on Saturday night he had a point, and you completely agree with it. That cannot be allowed in boxing, and it's just another example of British boxing not getting it right. They're picking a referee, like we said, that looked out of his depth. He's there slapping a fighter all throughout the fight, didn't have no control over them. And in a way, who wants to get in between two heavyweights who've been back and forth for a week? You can understand that a little bit, but that's his job. There's a meme there. That's his job. And I think if he didn't get that shot on TKV, I think TKV would have probably gone on, not potentially won it, but would have gone on stronger and stronger and stronger. We might have seen a much more watchable fight as the rounds went on.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree. He was in the ascendancy a little bit as he was coming into that one, and I think what makes this situation worse is the fact that before it, obviously Jack Rafferty, Corey O'Regan, almost an identical situation where Corey O'Regan is boxing a quality performance, and there could be question marks about whether or not he'd do it for the full 12 rounds and whether or not Jack Rafferty's physical capabilities would be too much for him. But ultimately, that was the exact moment that changed the fate of that fight and ultimately led to O'Regan losing that fight and losing, for the first time in his career. That one I don't think will get overturned because I think it was a little bit less clear than the Adeleye and TKV one was. But in as a pair of two events, and I think Jack Rafferty was probably the favourite going into that one. So again, you sort of feel less towards it, but it was so similar, wasn't it, in many ways?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was very much crazy to see two of the same thing pretty much happen on the same card. But like you said, O'Regan, I thought, started very well in the first two rounds. I was quite surprised he looked like very much able to compete with Jack Rafferty. But I think in the end, even though the late shot obviously played a big role, I think Rafferty would have got to him in the end, because I don't think he would have been able to sustain it over 12 rounds. Rafferty's just that bit more experienced and has been in those big British title fights. But yeah, like, he's got a case again, him to say, look, I took a loss that night, but that did not help my case. So there's no, like, his stock wouldn't have dropped really from that fight. I think he'll have probably another shot, maybe not at Rafferty, but another shot at someone else in the future, maybe one of the two that started the card on the night in an absolute war. But the main thing, I was glad that his corner pulled him out when they did, because I don't think there was any need to keep him in there to sustain any more damage, when I think that big shot had pretty much put him on the back foot from that point onwards.
Yeah, there's a fighter on this card as well, Mark Chamberlain, who made his return. Mark Chamberlain and Jack Rafferty signed me up for that fight. Jack Rafferty on Saturday night, unbelievable performance. Obviously, the controversy of the shot, but him and Mark Chamberlain would be some fight, And like you said, Ben, you touched on it a little bit. The first fight of the night, the welcome that Queensberry had on DAZN, what an absolute war to start in. And Majid looked like an absolute machine again. So I wouldn't be against him fighting Rafferty. But yeah, Rafferty, great performance. And it's just a shame in a way that it's been overlooked, because there's talking points about it. And, I'm going back in my memory now. I remember last year, Anthony Cacace, Joe Cordina, and I can't remember what happened in that fight, but was it sort of the similar way of the referee calling break in that? And Cacace hit him, and that basically changed the entire fight. Cordina never recovered from it. So it's not like we haven't seen it before, but to see it 2 fights in a row on the same night, I think it's unheard of, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a weird one, and I think we can sort of as we sort of wrap up this card and move on to the other one, a pick of a fight each to sort of touch up on. I know you boys sort of covered a few others. Royston Barney-Smith, for me, I'm going to say I thought another good performance from him. Just another quality performance, and the sort of performance where you start to think he's starting to get towards a level where you think you might want to see him tested a little bit more at a higher level, because he just seems to impress every time he's on a Queensberry show. And eventually you want to see him tested and step up and maybe pick up a title at some point soon. What about you, Ben? If you pick one fight to touch up on from the rest of the card?
To be honest, I didn't catch too much of the undercard. I only watched it from sort of the main event. So the Khalil Majid fight was the first one I caught. But I would agree with Harry. I wouldn't mind seeing Majid maybe step up towards British title level. And Alex Murphy, even though he lost, I thought he put in a really good performance. So him and Corey O'Regan might make for an interesting clash for Queensberry in the future if they want to sort of put the two losers against each other, I think.
Well, for me, we've kind of forgot about him, I think. Delicious Orie's professional debut. Not the greatest. I'm still on the platform as the train's going past, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, it wasn't the prettiest performance by him. His opponent was very negative and all that, but he's got that professional debut out the way now, and he can start getting to work and start getting used to being a professional boxer, planting his feet more and, swinging and putting the pressure on more. He wasn't the biggest of punchers in the amateurs. He always got the points decision wins. So I don't think he's going to be a big puncher, but it's great to see another British heavyweight coming through, a prospect that, hopefully in a couple fights time, I could get on board of that hype train and start calling in, future world champions and all that I get accused of a lot of with prospects. But no, it was not the best of debuts from Delicious Orie, but it's understandable in a way of the pressure that he was on. But yeah, like I said, I'm currently still on the platform as the train is going past after that performance on Saturday night.
See, I think you used to continue the train analogy. I think the train's just been held up in the station before. I think it's just it's a delayed train rather than a cancelled train. I think the hype train will come along.
Good point.
There's some, someone's got on the tracks. A difficult journeyman is on the tracks one step ahead, so there's just a slight delay. But we will see that kind of level of performance. I think when he like you say, gets used to the professional. And that is the difficulty with good amateurs, is they don't always make good professionals. And there is a learning curve. And I always go back to it. It was interesting to go back to someone like Andy Cruz, who was such a phenomenal amateur. And he's made a very conscious effort of, with his professional career, picking a team and a style that is allowing him to then progress into the pro ranks using the ability he picked up in the amateurs. And I think that's what we'll see with time, is Delicious Orie will pick up that style and get more used to being on the front foot as opposed to countering, which he was more of a counterpuncher in the amateurs, and sort of getting them as they shot. So that'll be interesting to see. Another amateur who had an impressive career that we mentioned, obviously, in the preview, because he was fighting on the weekend, and that's how preview and reviews work. Richard Torrez Jr., really difficult test versus Guido Vianello. We were sort of saying, Guido Vianello is someone, you need to pay attention to. And Richard Torrez Jr. did the job, didn't he? He really did.
Yeah, I was, I obviously weren't here last week, but I listened back to your boys' podcast, and I was thinking, you making me double guess whether Richard Torrez Jr. was going to get a win, but I thought it was a very good learning fight for him, good experience. Would have done a lot for his future and building him up now. In terms of going forward, like I said, I'd like to see him go up against someone like Hrgovic or a potential opponent like that now to really push his name out there a bit further. But I thought he was really impressive for like such a small, stocky heavyweight, the way he sort of lands his shots. And the thing I like about him most is how when he knows he's got someone hurt, he really goes for them and really looks to put that pressure on, which is always exciting to watch for any fan of boxing. So I think he's definitely, and in terms of American heavyweights, is the only one I think they've got to watch at the moment.
Yeah, he looks like the future of the American heavyweight division. And yeah, public apology that we did doubt Torrez, and I do apologise for that. But Vianello was off it on Saturday night, wasn't he? And I don't know if that was because of Torrez Jr. being the smaller man, but normally it's the bigger man that takes center ring, takes the power, takes the dominance of the fight. But yeah, Torrez Jr. looks something special. And like we said in the preview, if he gets through this, then there's something special there. And Vianello's a tough man. Let's not forget that he, in my opinion, beat F.A. Jagba. He lost out on a split decision and then absolutely destroyed one of the scariest looking heavyweights in boxing in Makhmudov. To then lose to Torrez Jr. Torrez Jr., we talk about fighters and prospects in a kind of way for Torrez Jr. He is still sort of a prospect coming through and he hasn't had that big test yet. But to have someone like Vianello on your record can only put you in a good place moving forward in the future. And when you started talking, Ben, I thought, oh, hang on a minute, Sam's walking away. He doesn't want to hear the analysis of this fight that we probably all thought wasn't going to happen. We all thought that Vianello was going to get the knockout. But no, it was a great performance by him. And it wasn't the best of fights, let's be completely honest. I thought it was quite a slow start. Very harsh referee mind giving Vianello a points deduction in the second round. But as the fight went on from 5 to 10, it was a really good watch, and Torrez Jr. showed a lot of his qualities in there, and he did get tested as well. His chin got tested a little bit, but no, it was a great performance. And like I said, I do apologise. I honestly thought that Vianello would have stopped him, but I'm more than happy to be proved wrong.
Yeah, I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum. I'm not going to apologise to Richard Torrez Jr. I will apologise to Ben for walking out. I was being blinded by the sun, which I had to go and fix. But I won't apologise, because I think, like you said, what we said was, I don't see him getting through this test because it's a really difficult test. But if he does, then he shows his level, and that's exactly what he did. You know, we questioned whether or not he would be able to show the level required to be a top heavyweight or a sort of outskirts top heavyweight, and he did, frankly, and I think, you know, fair play to him for that. Like you say, not necessarily the most entertaining fight, awkward styles. He's always going to be awkward style-wise for anyone, because, like you say, he's quite a short heavyweight. He's not the biggest, but he does what he needs to do, and he puts the work in, and he closes the distance well, and he swarms them when he needs to. And in a way, I'm not going to make this comparison in any sort of concrete way, but in the same way Usyk's able to, he's able to physically impose himself without necessarily being the bigger man. And he does that by using the ring well, by, you know, feinting, by keeping the guy busy and back. And I think that was how he's able to get Vianello onto the back foot, onto the outside, and then able to, you know, pick off his work from there. And fair play to him. I think he's the kind of fighter you want to see now for America, hold that flag and put in some big performances, and maybe have a go on a Riyadh season show in a fight where we know he's going to get tested in a 50-50 and prove himself and, you know, like you say, be the flag bearer for American boxing. So fingers crossed for him for that, for the future, in the same way that maybe someone like Abdullah Mason, who got another confident performance win, did on the bottom of this card as well. I haven't caught up on the full fight, only the highlights. But it was another great performance. And off the back of it, he's getting called out by another name I mentioned, Andy Cruz, which I think that would be some fight to watch. That would be some fight to watch.
Yeah, Andy Cruz seems to be throwing himself about for a few different names. Keyshawn Davis as well as another one. So he's after anyone and everyone who wants it by the looks of it. And he's not taking any sort of light steps. He's going up against what is considered the best prospects in America. So it'd be interesting if he can get one of those fights. That'd be massive. Maybe not massive globally in terms of sort of mainstream boxing audience, but pure boxing fans would be very excited to see fights like that. And I'm sure Jared Parry, obviously now of Ring Magazine, he'd be very excited to watch that one as well.
Well, that's got a Riyadh season written all over that fight, hasn't it? Abdullah Mason, Andy Cruz, surely, and be a great watch, great performance on Saturday night, mind. I tried to put him down as my prospect of the year or fighter to watch, and I was told I wasn't allowed. But yeah, keep watching him and keep getting excited, because I think he's something special there, Mason. And yeah, let's hope that he can push on now this year and get into those big fights that he deserves. And yeah, that Andy Cruz fight, sign me up for it. Yes, please.
Absolutely. And do you know what? I think another great weekend of boxing. You know, DAZN having their first Queensberry show, which was a success, entertaining to watch. I enjoyed that. To finish it off, what we're going to do just before we wrap it up, one fighter from the weekend that you're looking forward to watching going forward based off their performance this weekend. Ben, starting with you.
That's a good question. You've put me on the spot, but I'm going to go with Khalil Majid. I was very impressed with how both him and Alex Murphy, very tough. And that was, of all the fights I watched this weekend, that was by far and away my favourite fight. So very much looking forward to seeing him back in action and where they stick him in next Queensberry, whether they try and push him for sort of British title level or where he's at. But I think very exciting fight to watch. For
me, Richard Torrez Jr. You know, I was going to say Majid after that absolute war fight of the weekend. That was, by the way, I think. And but yeah, Richard Torrez Jr. It'd be interesting to see where he goes next, because he's beaten Vianello now, and let's be honest, he's not too far away from the big boys, and it's all about keeping up that momentum now, moving forward this year, and not taking a step back, not taking an easy opponent. Let's keep like I said, the momentum going, and let's see what happens.
Oh, you've picked the two best there. So do you know what? I'm going to go slightly on the different side. I'm going to go for Delicious Orie. I think it's not his fault that his hype train's being manned by Transport for Wales. It's inevitability that it's going to come late. But when we see him, I think he's going to put a statement performance in his next performance on a Queensbury show on DAZN. And I think he's going to get a big stoppage. That's my call here over the 4 rounds. So I'm looking forward to that. And as always, thank you everyone for tuning in. As we quickly close down on 100 episodes, we've got something interesting planned for that. We'll see if hopefully we can make that work coming up. So if you haven't already, subscribe to get that in your subscription feeds when it comes out, hopefully in about a week or so. Otherwise, subscribe for the preview later in the week as well, when we have a look at Boots Ennis versus Stanionis and talk about some of the things that are coming up in boxing, big fights, controversial things, as always. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you all later in the week.
Punches chance. Punches Chance podcast.